So, Sahreen, obviously this is about burnout. This is about schools with their staff teams. And we know that staff are leaving in droves. We know that staff burnout and stress statistics are very, very high. What, in your experience and from your research, makes the biggest difference in your teams?
I think the research in this area, and I've spent a lot of time sort of studying people and leading people. And I think that for me, it's about making sure that we're really clear on what the research actually says, because focusing on one of the pillars, so there are 4 pillars from what the research says. One of them is around well-being. But in my view, if you only focus on that one, you can actually make things worse, because what you're not doing is putting in the correct infrastructure. So like all good leaders, you've got to have a strategy for people. You've got to have a strategy for organizational culture. You've got to have a strategy for making sure that we are retaining staff and creating cultures in schools that are positive, that are evidence informed, that are child centered. And I think that all of those things have to be very clearly planned in for and spoken about from a holistic angle, rather than just looking at it from a well-being lens.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to talk us through those 4? Because I know you've researched into them, and I think they balance out the whole issue of burnout really well for schools.
Yeah, so I think the first one is around leadership and management. So how visible are the leaders? What kind of culture have they created in the school? Have they been bold and courageous enough to really make it a child-centered philosophy? So actually, it is very clear that the decisions they make are always in the best interest of the children. And actually, that takes a very clear articulation of the vision, reminding the people that you lead of that vision all of the time, and reminding people why what they do matters so much. It's not about a good Ofsted report. It's not about winning in the league tables. This is about preventing unemployment. This is about making sure that the children become adults that are successful, that thrive, and actually have really good literacy rates. Because if you don't have very good literacy rates, what can happen is if you look at sort of people in prison, a lot of them, I think it's 60 or 70%, either have a specific language communication need or are not very literate, have high literacy. So it's about making sure that culture of why we do what we do, we're not shy about. We're really, really clear about, actually, we have to get this right, because this is about this child's whole life, and the power of, if we get it right, we can turn around generations. We can change generational unemployment. We can turn around generational aspirational cultures. We can really, really make a difference on a big scale, not just our little school where we come every day and leave every day. It's about making sure that the staff you lead, that happens. I think also it's about making sure that leaders understand that end of term busyness. Now, I don't have any research in this area, but one of the things I've noticed, being in schools, is about 6 times a year, the couple of weeks before every end of half term and every end of term, staff need leaders even more than they do at other points of the year to be the best versions of themselves. So not highly strung, not looking like they're on their hands and knees, not going around creating these kinds of, this energy of so much to do, but really taking the time to put their best versions of themselves. So having that personal responsibility of showing up for the staff when they need you most, because that's when staff around you need you to be your best version, because they have just 5 or 6 weeks or 7 weeks, depending on the length of the term, of very, very, very frontline difficult stuff of doing what it is they need to do to turn up for those children every day. And I think that leaders at that point have a real duty to be even more visible and even more positive and even more aware of their own stress and their own in the grip, if you like, so that, that all that hard work that's happened in that term of building people and investing in people isn't then ruined or wasted.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, there's a small piece of research out that shows that if you take a moment before you walk in the door of a school or in the classroom, just take a moment to breathe, even for 10, 20, 30 seconds, and think, how do I want to turn up today? And that's for teachers and leaders alike. But it just reminds you, I want to bring energy, I want to bring enthusiasm, because we all went into the profession because we're passionate about changing lives, aren't we? But I guess the question I would have, Sahreen, is who's looking after the leaders then? If the leaders are being that self-aware and that strategic and culturally changing the way that they are leading the school, who's then looking after them?
Well, I think we have to, I think we shouldn't be shy about saying there's an aspect of personal responsibility that all adults have to turn up to remind themselves that the scope of the work that they're doing. So I think that's something we have to develop ourselves. So no one's ever really shown me how to do that. I've just figured out over the years what I have to do to myself, or make time for myself to be even, to be the best version of myself. So I think we have to spend some time looking after one another. I think leadership teams have to do that. I think the head teacher has to carve in time in leadership meetings to develop that, and the CPD to be centered around that. And some powerful practical ways of doing that is to script conversations, is to be mindful of, things like how you dress. And I think, about having a culture of making sure that you can call it out with one another. So we do a lot of sort of psychometric testing in the schools that I've led in. So either this one before, where I invest a lot of time making the leadership group be very comfortable in calling out each other's blind spots. So I don't know if you've heard of MBTI, but this idea of making sure that we can safely call out when another leader is in the grip. So I think in those particularly pinch points where leaders can very easily get into the grip, if you've invested in that culture and that culture is working, then technically one leader should be able to cover another leader if they notice and spot that they're in the grip. So it's not just being self-aware, it's being aware of one another as a group quite well. And I think that's about the safe space that a head teacher creates for leaders to support one another at those times and at other times, and being able to say, listen, I don't think I'm the best person at this moment to be able to deal with that. Can someone do that on my behalf? And I think that, when you get culture right is when you've got those conversations in leadership meetings weekly that are right, and where that's a genuinely safe space to be authentic, because leaders can't always be fully authentic with the people that they lead. There's a limit to that, but with one another they should be able to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's basically about having a leadership team where there is trust, safety, authenticity, to be yourself and to be real with each other, because then you can be the best. Yes. Yeah.
And I think that if you see that someone's in the grip, that you might be able to sit down with them and say, I've noticed that, you're behaving in a way that might be adding a bit of pressure in the well-oiled machine. So do you want to sit down? Let's script your day. Let me give you 5 minutes. Let's talk it through. What can I do to help you? Because you're acting a bit crazy. And I think there's no harm in having language like that between people that you trust. And I think it's that developing a very established shared lexicon, which means that you're giving each other permission to always help you to be your best version, especially when staff need it the most.
Yeah. No, I love that. Do you want to go on to the next, the second of the four?
Yeah. So the second one I would say is the behaviour and management. So again, really being clear about culture. Are leaders visible? Are they making sure that they know the children that are dysregulated or presenting with behavioral difficulties with teachers? Do they know the impact that's happening for that teacher? Are they giving them enough supervision and respite? Are they walking around and acknowledging that? Are they valuing it? Are they then trying their best to think innovatively about what more they can do? And I think that those aspects of consistent behaviour routines, making sure that the behaviour policy isn't just a lovely, neat policy that's formatted, but it's actually in action. So you're going around and checking that, is it working? Are you holding the narrative? When I was in a school in special measures, one of the things that I learned from a behaviour consultant that I worked with was holding that narrative. So when you do have a school where behaviour systems and routines are not well established or well embedded, sometimes you can develop a culture of staff making sweeping statements. Everyone's fighting, everyone's doing this and everyone's doing that. And what you do very slowly is build a picture around what is actually happening and what are you doing in response to that, and what is the impact of that? And I think if you're always holding that narrative and making sure that you're evaluating the impact that you're having on improving behaviour over time, that's all staff want from you. I don't think staff expect leaders to have all the answers on everything all of the time, but it's about that complete transparency of that transaction. I, as a teacher, am responsible for 30 children, and 5 of them are, do drain me. And ultimately, it's what are you doing for me that matters. So yes, it's important what you're doing for the school, but as a teacher in the big system, I want to know, what is that leader doing for me? And how is it making a difference for me? Because this is my everyday life. And I think we mustn't ever take that human element out of which teachers have got the trickiest children in the school.